Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. This is Jen and I am going to get started on a fun Halloween themed album using my Country Craft Creations design team package for September, which I did share a design team haul video on my channel, and I will be using Photoplay's Creepin Reel for this super cute, fun, love the colors. And the first thing I'm going to do is get started with the album construction itself. And what you will need for that, let me just put aside all my score tape sheets here. So you're going to need the heavyweight chipboard, 2 pieces at 6 1/4 by 8 1/4, which will be the size of our album. And then your spine piece is 2 1/2 by 8 1/4. Now, I just want to let you know also, when I do my chipboard bends, and I've said this before, more on one plane than it does the other. I like to have, the way that my album is going to open, I like to have the chipboard on the stiffer plane going this direction. So if you're concerned about that, it doesn't really make that big of a difference. It's just a preference, but that's how I do it. So you have your 2 6 1/4 by 8 1/4 and your 2 1/2 by 8 1/4. And then I'm going to be using Black Artisan, and I'm going to wrap this in the CCC lay flat method. And I'm going to go ahead and go over the whole thing with you. Normally I would just put a link to the lay flat method video below, but I am going to do this video a little differently than normal. So what you have is 2 sheets of 8 1/4 by 10 1/4 for your front and back, and then one at 5 1/2 by 10 1/4. Okay. So I like to use score tape sheets, and I'm going to go ahead and put those on. I'm going to flip this over so I can still see my sizing. And I'm just going to pull up a little. And you can get, you can do this with score tape. You can do it with glue. Some people use a Xyron laminating machine. Whatever works for you will work just fine. I'm going to grab my smoothing tool here and just smooth that all out. And don't worry if it overhangs a tiny bit, it's just going to go into the crack of it. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other one. Sometimes I cut my tape a little wider than I do the chipboard, just to make sure I have enough. I would rather have full coverage and a tiny little bit of the adhesive hanging over than to not have enough coverage. And I am just doing this portion. And like I said, you can, ooh, I got that one a little crooked, but that's all right. Sometimes it gets a little tricky. And if you are concerned about the overhang, what you can do is take a self-healing mat, which I have here. It's kind of a dirty mess. I apologize for that. I'm going to set that in here, and I'm going to grab an X-Acto knife and show you how I clean it up. I'm just going to put this in here, and using the self-healing mat, I'm just going to run it right along there. And try not to cut the chipboard. That's why I say if it's not a big deal to have an overhang, but some people prefer not to have that little bit sticking out. And I'm actually one of those people. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you this way of doing this. You can also cut it a little shorter than the chipboard and then put glue around the edges, which we will put glue into the sides where it meets the paper, just to help with the paper sticking and bending correctly. Gives it a little bit more pliability, if that makes sense. Okay. Just gonna go all the way around this one. It looks like I got this one quite a bit bigger. And just take your blade up against the chipboard. That way you don't chance actually cutting your chipboard. which I don't want to do. This one's a little bit of a mess because like I said, I put it on a little crooked. So I'm going to go ahead and do this side first because it's quite janky. I'm trying not to let this stuff stick to my fingers, and of course it wants to stick. Isn't that the way it goes? But if you cut from the other side, you have more of a chance of slicing into that chipboard, and I don't want to do that, so I will deal with it getting my hands a little sticky. All right, so now I have all of my pieces covered with score tape. And I am going to first grab the spine piece, and I'm going to lay my 5.5 by 10 1/4 down. And I am going to take my spacers. Now, if you don't have the CCC spacers, they are restocked right now. If you don't have them at all, you can also use a 1.5-inch ruler, such as the Tim Holtz ruler, if you have that. Or you can make spacers yourself, but these are great to have. They are definitely something that I am glad I have in my crafty arsenal because I use them all the time. So they are definitely worth picking up. All right, so I'm just going to peel my score tape back. And I am going to slide this up against... Ooh, I got a little stuck. See, this is what happens when you get a little bit of that. I apologize. I got to pull this up really carefully or I'm going to rip my artisan, which I don't want to do. So this is what happens when you get it a little crooked. And that's what happened. So it got stuck. So let's try that again. I'm just going to go ahead and butt that up against here. And there we go. Okay, pull those out. And I did bend my paper a little, so I'm just going to go in, making sure all that score tape is laying down. We'll set that one to the side. We'll do all the bending and all that next. Again, I'm going to put this down with my 8 1/4 by 10 1/4, 8 1/4 at the top. Pull this down into frame, 10 1/4 at the bottom. And this time we are going to use 2 of the 1-inch. One across the top, one across the bottom. There's also an L-shaped version that you can get. And I will link those below because I have used them and make it easier for you to find them at the CCC store. And for some reason, I don't have my pokey tool next to me today. And this score tape sheets didn't want to come off. Again, I'm going to butt this up from the side first and then to the top because I don't want what happened with the spine the first time to happen with this. I'll simply remove those, give it a good burnish. You'll start to see lines where you will be folding. And then finally we'll do our last one. Again, with the 1-inch across the top, 1 inch across the bottom. And our last piece of chipboard here. I'm just going to peel back my score tape. And we will do this from the side, like I said. Just kind of really get it up there in that corner, and it will help guide you the rest of the way. Give me 1 second here. We are going to do our folding and put this little book album cover together. All right, so I'm going to pull my scoreboard out of here, and we're going to start with the spine. I'm going to grab a bone folder, and I'm just going to flip this over so that the chipboard is face down. And I am just going to run my bone folder along those edges. Do it gently. You don't want to crack your paper. I am using Artisan, which does not crack frequently as some other papers, but you still want to be gentle. It's paper. We don't want to have a crack and have to start over. So Once you get that like so, then you're going to just start bending. That just helps move the paper a little. And we're just going to go in and burnish both sides. Really get that paper where it is easy to bend without hurting the paper itself. As you can see, doing this in a gentle fashion in steps will save you from many heartaches of cracking your paper. These bone folders sometimes can go right through your paper, and we don't want that. So this is what I have so far, as you can see. And what I'm going to do now is just grab my art glitter glue, and I'm going to put glue right along this edge of my chipboard and just down about 1/4 of an inch on the corner. And then I will run glue all along this flap here. I'm going to do the same thing on both sides. So we run that glue and then all along here. Okay, hopefully you're following. You can see where I put that glue. And we are going to fold this down. Again, be gentle. And you'll see it'll try to give. So just keep working it until you can get it nice and flat, the little flap there, okay? And some people cut these corners completely off, and that works as well, especially if you're doing black, because if you do make a little mistake and some of your chipboard shows, you can always use a black Sharpie to fix that. I just have been doing it this way forever, so this is how I do it. Just want to get that nice and up against that chipboard as much as possible and get it nice and flat. And you'll see, like I said, it's going to give, and you don't want that. So we're just going to set that aside and let it dry. Then we'll work on our back and our cover. Same thing here, but with these, I'm going to start bending before I do any score lines. I want to just get a nice bend started so I can see where to put my score tool. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to gently run down the side. This is just helping acclimate the paper so that it wraps around without cracking. And it will wrap around our chipboard. And then once there's glue in those spaces, that also softens the paper and helps it wrap and stretch a little bit. Okay, now when we turn this over, you will see the corners. Now you can cut the corner completely out, or you can cut a mitered angle across, leaving just a touch of space there. I like to leave a little just to make sure my chipboard doesn't show. Just gonna cut these. And see, as you can see, if I hold this up, there's just a little space there. Get rid of those. And I like to do the short ends first. So I'm going to take my glue, just like we did with the spine, and I'm going to run it all along my chipboard here. Kind of work it in there, and then I will add glue here. And you can use score tape on this part. A lot of people do. I choose to use glue. And I'm going to grab a little rag here. Always have a little rag handy for that glue overflow. Get that nice and straight, and then you want to go in, and you can see where I have extra paper, and I don't want that. So I'm just going to use my nail, and I'm going to bend that in so that this is flatter. Go and do the other side. Again, just put glue right in there and spread it around a little. And then we will put glue on there, and we will bend this down. Clean up the extra glue. And I will go in again and bend down those corners. You just want to kind of tuck those corners in. And then we'll do the same thing on the long sides. Run your glue down. And then all on that 1-inch flap. Fold that over. And the longer sides, I do like to use my bone folder to kind of assist me, just to make sure. And I start in the middle with my burnishing and then do the ends. That way I don't transfer glue all over it and make a big mess. All right, other side, same way. And I will do the second one off camera probably, and then I will show you how to put all these pieces together. So we're going to do the other side exactly the same. I go in with my bone folder just to kind of get that glue worked up against the paper and the chipboard. And then start from the middle and work my way out. And this will give you a nice seamless cover. Then what I do is take the back side of my bone folder and I'm just going to run across each edge. However you like. If you like that rounded look, you can leave it. I prefer a nice, smooth, flat edge. And that's what I have now. Okay? So I will put the other one together on camera and then, or excuse me, off camera. And then I will show you how to put all the pieces together to make the album. All right, so back to the spine. It's nice and dry now. I'm just going to go back to the back side again. Run my bone folder right down that edge. Get a nice crisp line there. And then I am just going to take my scissors, butt them right up against the edge and just cut a small amount off. We're just going to miter a little. Doesn't require a lot. We're going to do that on all 4 of the edges. All right. So now we have our spine. I'm going to go ahead and do a little bit more burnishing so I get a nice crisp line there. Go in with my back side and you get that nice crisp look, which I love. All right, so now comes the fun part. We're going to put this thing together. And what you need for that, I'm going to bring my scoreboard in. I'm going to turn it sideways so that I have this bottom portion right here. Put this knife away. Don't think I need that anymore. And what we're going to do is use score tape on this. I'm going to grab my 1/2-inch score tape and my tear tool. And you want to run score tape along the side here of the score line, but leave about 1/8 of an inch of room between your tape and your score line. You don't want to go all the way over to that edge. Otherwise you can see the tape, and you don't want that. So we're going to do that. Just do 2 pieces side by side, and I will add glue just for added strength. This is 1/2-inch score tape I'm using. Okay, I'm going to put that on both sides. This is already at an angle, so I'm going to use it. As you can see, I have not quite, probably a little more than 1/8, but not quite 1/4 of an inch away from that spine. I don't want it right up against the spine, because then if you put your cover on, a lot of times you'll see that score tape underneath, just like you would see glue, and I don't want that. So this is just a much cleaner way to do it. So I'm going to put this in my scoreboard. And I'm going to get that tape nice and burnished. And then I'm going to actually grab my pokey tool because I have one. And I am going to peel this off. Okay, I want to peel the backing off, not the tape. My pokey tool's a little bit fancy today. Okay. Let's see how I have this upside down, okay? And this is right side up. Then you're just going to take one of your 6 1/4 by 8 1/4 wrapped panels. Make sure this is all nice and straight in that corner of your scoreboard. And then I just want to get this right up next to that spine. Give myself a tiny bit of room. And flip it over. And I didn't add glue this time. I don't really need it. You can add glue. And just make sure that everything is going to turn nicely, which it does. And then I'm going to do the other side. So I'm going to burnish this tape down. Peel it off. And I flip mine upside down just to make sure that we get the same sizing. Plus it's easier to do it from this side, right? So that means I want this upside down so that I can see my measurements. And I want to make sure you guys can see. Go ahead and burnish this a little better. And again, we're just going to bring that in and butt it quite almost right next to your spine, but not quite. You just want to leave just a tiny bit of room. At least that's how I do mine. Some people butt it right up against there. I like to have that little extra movement. And as you can see, that lay flat method is amazing and gives you this. Now next we're going to cut a piece of the black artisan that is 5 1/2 by about 8 1/8 to cover this space here. So I'm going to grab I think I already have one actually. Yes, I do. So this one, let's see what I have here. I have 5 1/2 and 8 1/4. And I don't know that I want it to go all the way to the top. So we're just going to take a little bit off of this since I already have it. Again, it's 5 1/2 inches wide. And we're just going to take it down to 8 1/8. So 5 1/2 by 8 1/8. And I'm going to use my scoreboard to help me with this as well, just to make sure that everything looks good. And then I can pull it out of the frame. This is going to have some score tape and glue. So I'm going to use my tape glider, and I am going to put some lines of tape down the spine. This is just for added, and on those side pieces where this is going to go. This is just for a little added stick, so to speak. You don't have to do that step. I just prefer it. And then I'm going to grab my 5 1/2 by 8 1/8 and add glue to it. Try to get as close to those edges as you possibly can. You don't need a ton of glue because, again, we did use the tape. And then I'm going to take my glue, and where this chipboard is, I want to run glue in here. And the reason for that is it's going to help with movement once this is on, okay? So now you just want to make sure I am in camera view. We want to make sure that this goes on and lines up with the pieces behind it from what we put on. It should be the same 5 1/2 inch width as the paper that's already down. You're just going to get this nicely burnished flat first. Make sure you get those corners really burnished and get rid of any excess glue that's hanging around. Then what you want to do is take your bone folder and just slowly find that ditch of where our spine meets the cover. And we're just going to slowly and carefully, be very cautious. Again, it's just paper. You just want to kind of work this, open it as you're burnishing with your scoring tool. And that will give you a little bit more play so that you don't crack your paper, okay? Flip it over and do the same thing. Find that ditch, make a line, and then just start bending it open, or excuse me, closed. Don't know open from closed today, I guess. And this might be a little bit thin of a bone folder that I'm using. Sometimes it takes a little bit thicker one to really get in there. And you should be able to get to where you can bend this and not crack it. And then you can run your bone folder down the spine on both sides. We're going to give this a nice burnish again, because as you see, it will flatten itself back out. Do the same on the other side. Make sure everything is lining up. And I'm going to do that on this side. And there you have it. So next up, we will add our pages and our decorative stuff. And this is going to be a really fun album. I absolutely love this collection. So stay tuned. All right, so next up, we are going to work on our signatures, our pages. There are 4 pages to this album, and I am going to go over the first one with you. So the first one, you will need a piece of black artisan that is 12 by 8, and we are going to do some scoring on this. So go ahead, take the 12 by 8. We're going to put that on the scoreboard. And it looks like I did this way. I've already scored this one, but I will show you. We're going to score this at 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch, and 6.5 inches. Okay? Just make that line a little bit crisper. And this is going to fold over. And when we flip this over to side B, we are going to do a double belly band on this side. So you will need 2 more strips of the black artisan, one at 2 inches wide by 9 inches tall, and the other at 1.25 inches wide by 9 inches tall. I'm going to take the 2 by 9, and I'm going to go ahead and put that in my scoreboard, and I'm going to score it at 1/2 inch and 8.5 inches. Or you can flip it around and score it 1/2 on both ends. We're going to do the same thing with the 1.25 by 9. Put it in there at the 9, 1/2, and 8.5. Okay? And we're just going to set those aside. And when we decorate the pages and do our matting, I will show you how to assemble those and add a magnet to that back page. So that's the first one. Fairly simple. The next one is a little bit more in depth. So let me grab all my pieces here. And I have my mock-ups also in here, so it seems like more paper. So you're going to first have 2 pieces that are 9.5 inches by 8 inches of the black artisan, 1 piece that is 6.5 by 8 inches. I think I have this. Oh yes, this is part of a belly band system, but we were going to do that. I'm going to do that when we do our decorating. So then you're going to take a full 12 by 12, the easiest way to do this, a full 12 by 12 sheet of artisan, and cut it down to 3 4-inch strips, okay? So you will get all 3 of your pieces, your entire waterfall, out of one 12 by 12 sheet this way. You're going to cut 1 to 11.5, 4" by 4. One at 10.5 by 4, and one at 9.5 by that 4. So, and keep those little pieces. You never know when you're going to need a little extra piece of a cardstock for a hinge or something. I like to keep all those little scraps. So that is our waterfall, and that's the first thing we're going to assemble because it's fairly simple. I'm going to go ahead and score these, each one of these. I'm going to put them in my scoreboard lengthwise. So this is our 11.5 by 4. I'm going to score at 4.5. I'm going to turn around and score at 4.5. And we're going to do that on all three. This is the 10.5" piece. I'm going to score at 4.5. Turn it all the way around, score at 4.5. The next one is the 9.5. We're going to score at 4.5. Turn it around and score at 4.5. And what that's going to give you, as you can see, is the first one is going to have a 1.5" space. Then you're going to have a 1" space and a 1/2" space. This is going to make our waterfall. Okay. So the next thing you want to do, I'm going to turn my scoreboard sideways because it makes this a little easier. And I'm going to actually slip these out of here and push this up so I'm a little more in frame. And I'm going to put this down on here. The first one is our 11.5. I'm going to fold over the first flap of the next one, which is the 10.5, and just line that up really well. Make sure everything lines up. This will help line up your waterfall nicely. So once you have that all lined up, what you want to do is add glue just to that 1". I think it's actually 1.25, 1.5. So that's 1.5. This one is 2.5. Sorry, I misled you there. So you have a 2.5" space, a 1.5" space, and a 1/2" space. So we're just going to add glue to that 1.5" space, just past our score line, just like so. Okay. And then we want to hold on to it and put this, with this on your scoreboard, you will see that our first line that we scored is at that 4.5. Put this right at the line where you see the 5. Line it up nicely and burnish it nicely. I'm going to grab a rag, which I'm not seeing. Oh, here it is. Goodness, I need to be more prepared here. And just get any excess glue out of there. And then just pull it down, make sure everything is lining up, and then you can pull this one up and make sure that you go on that score line. Mine is being a little difficult with me, probably because my glue is still a little wet. We're just going to make sure. You can push this up against your scoreboard to make sure that you're lining everything up and that you're getting that 1/2" space. See how nice and crisp that 1/2" is? And that is that. And then we're going to lay that back down. Then we're going to take our last one, do the same thing. We're going to fold that over next to our 1/2" space. And we are going to add glue to the back side where that 1/2" is between the score lines. And this one is going to go right at that 5.5. Line that up nicely. And make sure you get it all nice and burnished. And then go ahead and make sure. I use my fingernail to kind of guide that. You can use your score tool if you feel more comfortable, just to kind of guide that into place. And then we can pull this one up and go ahead and pull this one up just so that everything is nicely burnished. And then just pick it up and take a look. I'm going to go ahead and burnish everything down. And do you see how nice and neat and tidy our waterfall is? For some reason, I'm getting a little bit more than a 1/2 inch on one of mine, and I'm not quite sure why that is. I'm going to try turning mine this way and see. Yes, that's why, because I have it backwards. So you can flip it the other way as well. I might just not have set it down. Nope, that's how it goes. So flip it all the way around, and you will see I have all those nice 1/2 inch spaces. So when we glue this to our page, this area right here is all that will be glued. And we will do that when we do our decorating. But that is your waterfall. And you can go through and re-burnish. Each one of these is a suggestion, just so it's nice and straight and clean. See how that one's bigger? So I just, when we had it like this one's a little bigger. So I just picked it up and turned everything this way. And then everything is back to being 1/2 inch. So one way it'll be a little bigger. Flip it this way, everything's 1/2 inch. Okay? I hope that makes sense. All right. On to the pages. Set your waterfall aside. So for the 9.5 by 8s, these are going to essentially be doors for our pages. So let's go ahead and do the page first. This is the base page, and all you need to do with this one is put it in at that 6.5. We're going to score this at 1/2 inch and at 3/4 inch. Okay? Easy peasy stuff. Set that aside and bring in one of your 9.5 by 8s. So for the 9.5 by 8s, we are going to score first at 1/2 inch and then at 5 inches. Okay? Do the same thing on the second one. Put it in at your 9.5 here. Oh, excuse me, these are 9 1/4. I don't know why I wrote 9.5. They are 9 1/4. I apologize. Just trim 1/4 inch off if you already cut that. I do apologize. So 1/2 inch and 5 inches. So these should be 9 1/4 by 8. So if you have cut those right when you started, rather than 9.5, and you've already cut them at 9.5, just put them back, even if you've already scored, and cut them down to 9 1/4, and they will work. The reason for that is these are, here are my mock-ups. These are going to go on our page like so. So when we fold them, the second one on the inside needs to be a little bit smaller or it will catch. So that is why this is a little smaller than this one, okay? So this piece that I've cut here, we will work with when we do the decorating. This will become a belly band mechanism to hold our waterfall closed. And I have just kept a 1-inch strip of paper that I had cut off one of my ends, and this will become our piece that will hold our waterfall down. Okay. All right, so for this page, we are going to have, excuse me, a 12 by 8.5 and a 1 1/4 by 8. I had made the pocket page a little weird earlier, so we're going to try it this way. So what you want to do first is put your paper in at the 8.5 and score at 8. Where is my score tool? This is going to be a little bit easier way to make a pocket page than the original one that I had put in my video. So, and we will arrange these pages when we decorate them and put them in the book. I did not number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or excuse me, 1, 2, 3, 4. So once we establish exactly where they're going to go, I will arrange them. We'll figure out how they fit in the book the best. Okay. So once you have that 1/2 inch score mark, you're going to go ahead and turn it this way. You're going to score at 5 3/4, which is the width of our page, and at 11 1/2. Okay. Now what you want to do is we are going to cut this little square down here at the bottom out first. And you can do this by mitering, like so, or you can cut the corner out and then do your mitering. Either way works. And then you want to miter this top corner as well. Okay. And then this whole 1/2 inch section down here, we're going to miter up to that one, and we're going to cut this all out. Now you might want to do this on a cutter, just to make sure that it's nice and straight, which is what I think I'm going to do. I'm not the greatest with my scissors, I will admit. So I'm going to grab a cutter over here that works in that manner. It's a push down cutter, which I find works better for this type of cutting. So I'm going to put this in at that score line, and I want to cut the bottom one out. So just want to make sure that my blade is all lining up, and it is, and just cut up on here. It would be 16. I'm not sure what yours is, but I just want a nice straight cut. So, and then you can just clip it out if you haven't already mitered that edge. So this is what you will have. You'll have mitered here, 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 and here. And then we have our edge there. We're going to fold in both of these flaps. As neatly as possible. And then I'm going to go ahead and fold this over just to make sure everything lines up, and it does, before I do any mitering. That way, if I needed to adjust this hinge a little bit, I could still. Once it's all mitered out, it's not as easy to do. So, I do not like that this overlaps quite so much. So, I'm going to go ahead and miter this just a little bit more, as you can see there. Just going to go over and miter it a little more. Fold this one down, and I see the same issue. You want to miter these pretty well so that they lay nice and flat, and that does now. Okay, great. So then we are just going to add glue. Sorry, I have a little frog in my throat today. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. I'm going to go ahead and add glue to these bottom and side flaps, like so. And then we're just going to fold over this side. This is a much easier way to make our pocket page than the original way that I had mocked it up. Everything will lay a lot flatter with this than the other way. And I will, normally I would leave that in the video, but it's just going to confuse you, so I will be taking that out and slipping this one in. And now, as you can see, you have a pocket, okay? And now, once that's nice and straight, you're going to grab that 1 1/4 by 8 inch piece, because a 12 by 12 is not quite long enough. Now, if you have longer paper in Artisan, which I don't think the black comes in the 16 or 18 inch length, but if you're using a different paper that does, you can just do 13 1/4 and you would have the whole length. But because I don't, I've cut a piece at 1 1/4 to 8, 1 1/4 by 8, and I'm going to put it in on that 1 1/4, and I'm going to score at 1/2 and 3/4. Okay, get a good score. And this is going lengthwise, so I don't need to miter. This is just going to take the place of our spot. Is that a 1/2 inch? This feels bigger than 1/2 inch to me. Nope, it is. All right. So I am simply going to glue the side half of this, just one of the 1/2 inch hinges. You can do either side, whichever one works for you. And I am just going to butt that up in here so that it's perfectly straight. And make sure that it's lining up with my page. And once I have that all in line, which mine is being kind of tricky, don't want to go over our score line. I need that 1/4 inch. That's our little bit of give space for our pages to lay a lot flatter. And just attaching this as our, now I do have a teensy bit extra here. I'm just going to trim that out. And there you have your pocket page, your 1/4 inch gusset, and then the 1/2 inch that will attach to the book itself. And I did that backwards. This should go this way, and this should go this way. I'm losing it today, I'm telling you. All right. Trying to get a nice crisp line here. So this is how our page will be. This will be in the book, and it will turn like so, okay? And last page, pull my excess ones out. Again, this is going to be a fairly simple page. I'm not sure why this is 6.5. Yes. So we have a 6.5 by 10.5. You're going to put that in your scoreboard first at the, let's put this first. We'll do the 10.5 first. We're going to score this at 8 on the 10.5. Okay. Then we're going to flip it around to the 6.5. And we're going to score this at 1/2, just up to that score line, and at 3/4, and this one will go all the way down, okay? And the reason I did that is you don't need the extra lines, because we're going to cut this little area out at the bottom. So you just want to cut on the score line up, and up this way as well. And the reason for that is because this is going to become a pocket on the other side. So go ahead and fold up your pocket, and if you see any overhang, just go ahead and trim it. That's going to be a pocket on that side. Need to make sure it lines up nicely. There we go. I see just a little bit of overhang here. Trim that out. It's just from where the score line was. And that will be that side. Then you're going to grab a 5 3/4 by 3. Put it in your scoreboard at that 3. And we are going to score at 2.5. Easy peasy stuff. Go ahead and miter at those score lines. And this is just going to become, oh, okay, this is not 5 3/4. This is 5 1/4. I grabbed the wrong piece of paper. So let me grab the right size piece of paper. I'm not quite sure how that happened. Goodness. Okay. Let me go ahead and grab a 5 3/4 by 3 inch piece. I don't know what happened there. 3 inches. And, oh, that's not long enough. Let's do it this way. 3 inches. And 5 3/4. All right, that was really strange. When I cut that, it should have been 5 3/4, and for some reason it ended up 5 1/4, but it is definitely 5 3/4. So go ahead and put your 5 3/4 again by 3 and score it at 2 1/2. And then we are going to miter those corners just so it fits nicely. And this is just going to sit right here. And that is going to make, did I do that right? Yes, it's going to make a second pocket. But you'll be able to put stuff this way, and you'll be able to put stuff in this part, because this is just going to get glued down on the sides. This is just here for looks more than anything. That's just how I'm doing my double pocket. And then I don't think that I had mocked anything up for the back side yet. So we will do that. We'll add a flip or a flap or something when we do our decorating.